All right, bit of a different midweek video today. We're gonna do this in one take. We've got 3 cameras, 1, 2, 3. They're all rolling. Caleb's gonna mash them all together, but we are gonna do this in one take. So I might have to stop and have a drink every now and then. And Mitch might yell at me if I'm not showing the camera something. But I'm gonna show you how I turn this brisket in a packet into a brisket that's ready for the smoker. And I'm gonna start by, first thing I was gonna say, now I usually religiously use one of these. I can't use it today because it's not big enough. You can kind of try and use it. All that happens is that the hemoglobin is going to hit the board anyway. So I'm going to use my wooden board and I'm going to scrub it down properly. I'm going to keep, we can start again if you want.
We can keep that.
All right, I'm just going to acknowledge that we didn't have the sound blankets up. Mitch wasn't happy, it was too echoey, so he's putting them up now, but I'm going to keep going. So first thing, we've got to get this thing out the packet. Pretty simple. Cut the vac pack open and take it out. And while I'm doing that, full disclaimer, if you don't know, which most people kind of do, this brisket is from Ebony, or it's from a company called Ebony, or a brand called Ebony, which is owned by a company called Kilcoy Global Foods that I work for. I work for Kilcoy Global Foods and have done for a long time. They're big supporters of this channel, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that, you know, all that was, you know, this was donated to me by them, all that was out in the open. I'll start the drying process now. Keep as much of that hemoglobin, it's not blood, it's basically just water, off there as possible. And where this come about is that the Texas barbecue video that you've probably seen if you're watching this, there's so much to cover when you're talking about Texas barbecue that it's really hard to do in one engaging video. So I kind of thought we'd break this out. Now, like I talk about, what I'm about to talk about in that video, Texas barbecue has been a hard one for me to do. I know my way around a kitchen. I know how to cook, but cooking, that's, no, don't eat that. Thank you. Thank you, duck. But smoking meat is it's a different beast, right? I do know my way around meat though, so I can confidently kind of do this and hopefully, you know, incite some of my knowledge in you guys. And we're gonna just kind of, we're not trimming this for like competition brisket or anything. I think we're just trimming this, in my opinion, to get the best result. So when you're looking for a brisket trimming, what you want, and what you also want is some stronger paper towel, it doesn't stick to everything. But what you want is something that's aerodynamic. And the reason you want it aerodynamic is because when the smoke hits it, if it's got all these big points, like, you know, this big hump here, it's gonna hit that and it's gonna burn, you're gonna, you know, ruin your bark, and you know, so we're going to trim this pretty heavy today. You can kind of trim it a bit lighter if you want, to try and keep, you know, some more of it on there. We're going to trim it pretty heavy like I would, but we're going to keep all the fat. We're going to render the fat while we're smoking this brisket, and all the meat and the flesh I'm going to grind down and I'll use for burgers or something like that, or just ground meat. And just before you say, oh, I don't have a grinder, you can grind meat by hand. You don't need to use a grinder. Right, knives. I'm going to use 2. This is a curved blade boning knife. It's a stiff blade, it's hard. Works really well for this stuff. And I also like to have one of these on hand when I'm doing this, just because it's a big piece of meat. This is a slightly flexible blade. It's actually a fish filleting blade, but you can probably get away with just a cook's blade if you don't have one of those, but you will need one of these. So I got my brisket here, my Ebony Angus brisket, beautiful Australian beef. I've got a rubbish bin here in handy. I've got some paper towels. And I've got a container to keep all my fat and meat in. First things first, we're going to take off this hump. And I get pretty aggressive with this and just take the whole thing off. Okay? And that's that done. Already, you can see that there's a much more streamlined kind of look to this brisket, which is what we're after. At this point, I'm going to flip it over. You can see here, there's a whole bunch of quite hard fat. General rule of thumb, the hard fat you need to get rid of. There's a big lump of hard fat there. We're just going to cut that right off. You can see that through there. That's not going to render in the cook. There's no chance, even if you cook that for 12 hours, that's going to render. So get rid of it. Take a bit more off there. Down this side, just going to start by tidying up that side. And then we're going to start working on this bottom area. And all we're doing is taking off a lot of this fat at the bottom You can keep a little bit on there, but you don't need heaps. You kind of have a fat side, and the underside, you don't want heaps of fat in there. And especially you don't want any of this silver skin. It's a long cook, but it's still not going to cook down. It's not going to render out in time. So we're simply pushing that through. I'm going to get in tight on this part up here, Mitch, and I'll tell the viewers kind of how to kind of attack that if you've never done it before. If you've never kind of trimmed meat like this, you're going to use the point of your blade. You're going to slide it just under that silver skin there. It's a bad example. And then you're going to run your knife as close as you can. What you don't want to do is be taking off flesh. So point in, push through. Always try and run your blade away from you as much as you can, or to the side. So if you slip, you've got less chance of hurting yourself. A lot of this stuff's just fat, and it is fat that probably will render. But we're going to kind of take it off anyway. So I was really lucky enough to trim a brisket with the guys at Terry Black's, the original, out in, what was that place called? Lockhart? Lockhart. Original Blacks, not Terry Black's. Oh, that was naughty. Bit of a feud there. And I did a good job apparently, so, you know, pretty happy with that. Okay, now you can get as particular as this as you want, but like I was saying, this isn't for competition. This is for backyard cooking at home. So I wouldn't stress too much. Just as long as you're taking off a lot of that hard fat, and anything that looks like kind of silver skinny, doesn't look like it's gonna break down, you're probably gonna be in a pretty good place. But the trimming is pretty important. You know, there is kind of stories out there of restaurants that pretty much open the packet, take off some of the hard fat and shove it in the smoker. And I would avoid doing that. I think it's definitely worth trimming and worth getting them looking a bit more aerodynamic. It's just this big piece of fat here, hard fat I want to get rid of there. Another little bit through here. I'm going to say that underside's pretty good. I'm going to flip this around. Okay, so through here, there's quite a bit of hard fat as well. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now, the other caveat is that there's a lot of ways to do this. So, you know, if you think that your way of trimming a brisket is better, then I'd love to see it and I'd love to check it out. But you know, there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat. So don't be super offended if this isn't how you do yours. This is just what I kind of have learnt from trimming briskets and have seen other people do, and you know, really reputable people do it. All right, pretty happy with that underside at the moment. We're definitely not there yet, but we're getting closer. So I'm gonna flip this guy over. There's quite a bit of fat into there, but I think I'm gonna leave it, otherwise you're gonna end up with a bit of a weird shape. I might kind of flatten that out a little bit, just so that it sits a bit better in the smoker. Just get this little bit of an artery hanging out there. Get rid of that. Okay, let's flip her over. So this side here, this is where we want to kind of keep fat. You want about just over 1 centimeter, maybe 1.2 or like ½ an inch of fat. It actually feels pretty good there. I want to take a little bit off the top. Don't be afraid to kind of just make a little incision, and just to see how deep that goes. Yeah, that's probably a little bit too much, but we don't want to trim off too much. You definitely want to make sure that there's a good coverage of fat across this top part. And that's going to keep our brisket really moist in the cooking process. You know, and it will render out this fat. It's a lot softer. You can see up here, there's some of this harder fat can come off a bit more, like so. And then down in this part here, you can feel that's a lot harder than you probably see that. I don't know if you can see that much or not, but see how pushing that fat and it doesn't spring back. Now, if I push this fat, it's rock hard. So it'll just struggle to kind of, to render. So I'm just gonna take a bit more off that than we have on the other sides. And then we'll start, once we've kind of got the fat kind of at the level that we're after, and I think we're pretty close here, we're gonna start making it look pretty streamlined. So there's a bit of silver skin over this section here. I'm gonna leave that. There was no fat on that part when it came out the packet, but I am gonna leave that silver skin on there just to try and protect that flesh a little bit. All right, so you can roughly see the shape of our brisket now. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm happy with how it's kind of sitting on the bench. But what we want this section here, I might just flip this around. We want this section here to kind of curve a bit more, right? So we can always take more, we can't put stuff back. So we'll start by just kind of rounding off the edge. What that does as well, you know, is it makes our flat end a lot bigger. The other thing to talk about is when you are looking for your brisket, I like a brisket with a decent, you know, kind of flat end, not too thin. So I'm gonna come in a bit tighter here because it kind of thins out a bit there. And I kind of don't want it too thin, but that's looking pretty good. You know, it's like a, you know, like an airflow or anything, you kind of want it to have the least resistance possible. I'm pretty happy with the shape of that now. Move on to this front side. I'm just going to trim this up a bit, nothing too crazy. Just like that. I think I'm pretty happy with that. And you can see that's a great shot to see kind of the amount of fat that I like to leave on top of my brisket, that amount right there. There is this hard part of fat that's always in this section here, but I tend to just leave it, and I will just carve this section out a bit more, just to get that a bit nicer shape. I'm just going to keep turning this so that we can have a good shot of it. Just tidying this end up. You know, this end will be at the end that the chimney stack's at. So I'll point the point at the front. Oh, sorry, this will be at the end that the smoke's at, the heat box. So the smoke's going to hit that straight up first. So you kind of really want that nice and aerodynamic. And the thing is, right, people are like, oh, you're wasting so much meat. Is often the complaint that you see. But all that happens is that just end up burning anyway, and it goes to waste. So you might as well take it off now, and then you can still use it for something like burgers or, you know, mince meat for something, as opposed to having it burn and then no one eating it anyway. All right, I think we're almost there. Just a little tidy up through here, just to make sure it's nice and neat. Good shape, no harsh edges, no pointy bits. I'm pretty happy with that. And there it is. A brisket that I think is really well trimmed for smoking. Like I said, plenty of ways to skin a cat. I'm sure there's going to be people that think that I have taken too much fat off. Some people that think I haven't taken enough off, but I think this is a great, you know, starting point. If you wanted to start smoking brisket and you want to start trimming your own briskets, I think you start with this and then play with it. See, leave a bit more fat on, take a little bit more fat off, and see how you go. But there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Super quick video. Like this video if you took anything from it. Subscribe if you're not. And if you haven't watched the Texas barbecue video that I did, then watch it somewhere. Peace.